All right, so let's build a new application in App Builder. If you haven't seen App Builder before, you have the benefit of new templates that we've updated over the last few months. So now you can pick any type of UI. We combed all of the line of business apps that we had from customers and online. And these are the most common UI layouts that people use. We also have sample apps. We have a brand new sample app called the HR dashboard, which is stunning. Andy built that on the design team and just looks great. So that is shipping with the product, and all of the other ones will co-generate just great with Blazor and web components like they should. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to templates. I'm going to click the nav plus content template. It's a basic template that has a master view. And in the master view, we've got view 1, view 2, view 3. And this guy here, if I just run it, we've got, it'll click to the different views. So what I want to do with this is on view 1, I'm going to call this one the grid view. And I'm going to call view 2 the chart view. And we're going to create a quick Blazor app. We're going to generate the code, and then I'm going to take it into Visual Studio and continue on with that application. So in the grid view, and actually let's go to the master view here. And I want to change this guy to say grid view, like so. And you can see this is just a beautiful WYSIWYG. And let's change view 2 to chart view, like so. I'm going to delete view 3. We don't need that. That button goes away. And then you'll notice here on when I click this, the navigate to is to the grid view. So we have all the on-click actions and the routing created for you. So in the grid view, I'm going to delete this. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to hit Control E, or I could go over to my toolbox and type in grid, and I can find the grid. You'll notice a new option here, tree grid. Very exciting because we had a lot of folks waiting for that tree grid. And I'm going to drag my flat grid onto the design surface. So from here, what I want to do is set a few configuration properties, but first I want to set the data source. Now I've already uploaded a data source here. I've got an autos API. So if I go over to Visual Studio, what you're going to see here is I have a web service that's running locally. This is actually a SQL Server database running a web API on top. And this is just a bunch of records. So here, if I bring up my Swagger UI, this is the data that we're going to be working with today. It's just some autos data. It's got like 20 or some fields and a few hundred rows. And this is what we're going to be querying from App Builder. And of course, it'll generate that service in the code gen. And that's what I'll be using inside of Visual Studio. So let me minimize that. So that has to be running because it's local. And I'm just going to point the API to it. So here, I'm going to say use my autos data, and it's going to go to API autos. Now, this morning, when I woke up, I forgot that I rebooted my computer last night and nothing was running. My web API was not running. So I ran this, and the beautiful thing of the Swagger definition to App Builder, we've got the schema. So my web API was not running this morning. It couldn't find localhost. So we just generated fake data. So we have the schema and we generate fake data. So you can actually be disconnected from your data source and we generate that fake data for you. So you're always working with something. You get a little warning. It says, hey, the data is not available. We're generating some fake data. So you always have data available. Now from here, you'll see that I've got the grid selected. And as usual, we've got some features. So I'm going to X out these features here just so you can see from scratch what the dialogue looks like. But I've got my grid, I've got my data binding. It's really important that you have your primary key set. I have a couple fields here. I actually added this identity column like after the fact. I was trying to do something and kind of failed. The ID is actually my primary key. It's a string, but it's a unique string. So I want to go to features, and you can see all the features that we have. Webinars of past, when we showed this for Angular, you always had the Angular code generation would do all these features. Now, the Blazor and the web components do all the features, which is really cool. So I'm going to say I want advanced filtering. Basically, I'm going to do everything. I'm not going to do paging because I don't have that many records. I have a few hundred or 200. I don't need paging for that. Maybe I need paging if I have 50,000 records. But I want to do grouping, hiding, moving, pinning, resizing, sorting, summaries. So you'll notice as I'm clicking all of these options, the the canvas is updating. So the grid is updating with everything that I'm doing. Now, if I hit the play button, I've got my real-time preview, Blazor server. Let's go back to Blazor WASM. All right, so the Blazor server code is being shown here. But the nice thing here is that it's generated all the column definitions, all the toolbar stuff, and then the service call to where I need to get my data from. So all this is built for you. And this was always the beauty of App Builder from day one, even from Angular, is that if you have a lot of columns in your data, you have to hand code all this. There's no way around it. There's no WYSIWYG for the web. In Windows Forms, WPF, et cetera, it was really easy. All this stuff would get generated for you. So with the web, no, I mean, you don't have that. So you actually have to code all this yourself. So we've got all this good stuff here and it looks great. And then if I go over to my chart view, you'll see that nothing is here yet because we didn't actually add anything to it. So we're not going to see anything yet, but I'm going to go ahead and change that right now. So we're going to leave that there. I'm going to go back to my page explorer. I'm going to click chart. And here I want to pick a slightly different layout. So I'm going to do like a top bottom layout, and I'm just going to show two charts. So what I'm going to do is a Control E, and I'm going to select a category chart, and I'm going to right click on this and do a copy, and I'm going to do a paste. So I just got two category charts, and the data is going to be the same autos data. So let's go to data, autos, API autos, and data, autos, API autos. Now, everyone looking at this is like, that's completely useless. And you're absolutely right. I'm going to show you the new capabilities in the category chart, which is going to clean this up with a couple settings on the category chart. So it's really easy. And then finally, what I want to do is I want to change the theme. So if I go back to my grid, I'm not going to do a dark theme because I'm going to show you how to set the dark theme in the CSS, but all the dark and light themes work. We've got 4 themes with 2 variants, Bootstrap, Material, Fluent, and Indigo, and they have a light and a dark variant. So you can see as I click through, you can set any theme. And then of course, if you want to create your own theme, you can go to town on colors, typography, roundness. And if I go here to custom themes, there's a couple custom themes that we built for different things, but I want to go back to my default themes. And I kind of like this. I think it was the Bootstrap. No, it was the Fluent Light. Yeah, I like the way this looks. It's actually pretty cool. All right, so that's all I'm going to do. Got my Blazor WebAssembly code. Let us download the zip. And this is called Untitled App. I probably should have given it a name, but it is, it is what it is at this point. So let's go to downloads. And I got a bunch of screens here. So I've got my Untitled App. I'm going to unzip this guy and I'll move over my Visual Studio in once it opens up. So let's double click Untitled App.Solution. Here's Visual Studio. It's popping up. And keep in mind, all this is done for you. You don't have to do anything fancy to get all of this code. Now, what this is doing at the same time is if I drill into my app and I go to dependencies and I go to packages, it's updating the required packages. So this needs our 22.2.608-dev build. So -dev means it's a pre-release build. But if I go to pages and I go to my chart.razor, you can see that it did my category charts here for me, and it generated all the code that I needed. And if I go to my grid view, it generated all of my grid code for me. Now, there's a lot of attributes here on the grid. So I'm just going to hit enter a few times so you can see everything that's going on. So in this case, I've got row selection, cell selection, editable, moving. There's a couple things that we're updating right now with some of the code gen. It'll be fixed by release. And it looks like filter mode here. What this is going to be is called, I think it's the grid. Oh no, filter mode. I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. Filter mode. And you can see that you get the autocomplete, and I want the filter mode.xl style filter. We have our grid toolbar, so that showed up nicely. And as I scroll down, you can see all of the stuff that was built. So let's go ahead and click run. And this is why everyone needs App Builder. Keep in mind, if you own Infragistics Ultimate, you have App Builder. If you own Ignite UI, you have App Builder. So there's no reason that you shouldn't be using it because it just built all this for me. So I don't have to write all this code. So I've got my grid, I've got my chart view, and you can see my charts. We're going to fix those in a minute. But let's go back to the grid view and let's see what we got here. So I told it that I want to group by. So let's go ahead and group by gender, for example. So now I've got all of my groupings here. I can collapse and expand all the groupings. You got a nice group header. You can select all, deselect all. You can basically do whatever you want. What's even cooler here, if I go to export and go to export to Excel, let's pop this up real quick. And look at that. I've got all my data already grouped. So it is the same groups that you get in the grid. We are really good at export to Excel, and this is built into the grid. So I didn't have to write any code to make any of this work. Also, if I want to hide a column or two, let's say I want to hide my identity columns and maybe, a bunch of different columns, I can do that. I can hide all, I can show all. All of these things are just built in. You don't do any of it. Pinning is another cool thing. And I'm going to show a little bit more with row pinning in a second, but let's go ahead and pin company name, for example, to the left. And now when I scroll like so, you can see that my company name is pinned to the left as it should be. Now let's get rid of that grouping. Once you enable filter mode equals Excel style filter, this is what you get. You get the drop down on the overflow with the pinning, the hiding, the sorting, the moving options. You can see that the columns are moving. You get the filters, and these are based on data type. And I'm going to show you a little bit there too in a second, but you can just deselect all. I can do a couple, hit apply, and those guys show up. But what I want to highlight is a few things. So you'll notice that I do have my summaries on the bottom, and I'm going to go over to birth date. So birth date is a column that we're going to focus on. And we're also going to focus on, I think there's a column named salary. Oh yeah, they're right next to each other, salary and birth date. So you'll notice here for salary, we've got just numbers showing up. And birth date, we've got the date type coming in from SQL Server. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and we're going to make a couple changes. We'll make more than a couple, then I'll run it in respect to time because we've got some other demos that we want to show. So I don't want to show these identity columns. So we have an attribute called hidden. So I can just say hidden equals true for these guys, and they're not going to show. So let me go ahead and copy this. And also I'm using Visual Studio 2022 with Blazor. There's some wonkiness in the IDE. So it's just kind of stuff you have to deal with. But first, let's go to our salary. Now it comes across as a number, but I know that it's actually a currency. So I'm going to change the data type to a currency, and we'll see how that's reflected in the running app. And then I'm going to change the birth date from a string type. And of course, you guessed it, this is going to be a date. So I just want to show a date, but not only does it display differently, you get different filter options, but you also get different summary options. Now, the other thing I want to do here is I want to show you, I'm going to group some columns here. So let's just group a few columns, and we've got this thing called the IGB column group. And an IGB column group, it allows you to group columns, and then you can make those columns collapse or expand. So let's do Control X, and we're going to group these columns together. Now the IGB column group has a couple properties. The first one's going to be header, and let's just say this one says employee information, info. And we've got a feature called collapsible, and collapsible is going to equal true. Now, when you think about the types of apps you build, you might have hundreds of columns, especially if you're in financial services. And this is where it comes into play. So once I set this, it doesn't automatically work because we're still working with columns in here. So there is a property called visible when collapsed. So I'm going to say visible when collapsed, and you can see that my IntelliSense is not, it's not keeping up. So I'm going to say visible when collapsed equals false. And I want to copy this. And if you're not the S guy, if you hit Control Alt and you hit the down arrow, it's going to select all the rows, and I can do a multiple Control V and it pastes them all in. Now, when you do collapsible columns, you always have to show at least one column when it's collapsed. And the reason we do this is because you might want to do a template column. Whoops, let me hit escape there. And I want to copy. So what I want to do is I want to show the email column. So I'm just going to leave it there, and I'm going to paste it in. So I'm going to have two email columns here. And for visible when collapsed, of course, it's going to be set to true. So now that's going to be there. Now, so that's the collapsible column groups. The second thing that I want to update here is something called the summary mode. So you'll notice that the summary mode before was like it repeated everywhere. And at the end of the day, you don't need that. So the summary calculation mode has different options. You can do root level, root and children, children level only. So I'm going to say root level only. And then the other thing that I want to do is I want to set row draggable equal to true. So in this case, I'm going to start typing in row, and you can see a bunch of stuff comes up. I'm going to say row draggable, and that's going to equal to true. Now, I'm not going to do anything fancy with that. I just want you to see how easy it is to implement some of these features. So now that I have that, let's go ahead and hit run, and we'll see what the output actually looks like. Now, at the same time, let's say I'm looking over at my slingshot. Oh, I had something go wonky there. Not sure what, but let's go ahead and scroll to the right, and let's go to our groupable column didn't work. I'm not sure why that didn't work, but what I do want to highlight here is our birth date. So you can see here that the birth date column is now displaying as a real date, and I've got the earliest and latest that come across. Also on my salary, you'll notice here that I've got the $ in front of the salary, and I've got the same summaries on the bottom, but they're actually formatted correctly. Now, if I go to username and I go to text filter, you can see that I've got specific type-based filter options. It's going to be the same for birth date now that it's a date filter. So today, yesterday, this month. So you get the ability to have these correct type-based filtering based on the column data type. So it's actually pretty slick.
Jason, line 32, you need to fix line 32.
Oh, okay. I'll check that out. Out. Thank you. And then here, if we go to the draggable, you can see you've got the draggable option here, which is also really slick. You write a little bit of code to like rearrange columns because you may not want this to participate in your sort. So that is something that you would have to just kind of update. And those are those samples that I kind of showed you. You'll be able to see all of that stuff. So Brian said collapsible equals true. Oh, I forgot the equal sign. Thanks, Brian. But since we're here, why don't we make one more change? And then I'm going to go over to the charts. So this is our avatar column. And our avatar column is actually a URL that points to a cloud-based guy. So there's our URL. And we've got some additional properties here: filterable, groupable, et cetera, has summary. I'm going to delete those guys. And what you got with Blazor is the ability to do something called a body template. And the body template is your templated column. Now you'll notice magically IntelliSense and Copilot told me what to put there. It's not quite right, but it's pretty good. I'm going to delete a few things here just to make sure this comes across right. So this is saying in my body template, I want an image. And what do I want that source to be? Well, it's not context.avatar URL. It's context.cell.value. And then style, width, and height is 50. I guess I'll leave that there. I think I was running it without that earlier, and it was, working just fine. And then the last thing I want to do while we're here is we have another really cool feature called an action strip. And the action strip is something that is like in your Gmail, when you're hovering over rows, you get that thing on the right-hand side to delete or edit or whatever. We have the same thing. And we allow you to customize it with your own custom buttons. And we have pinning, editing, and deleting there as well. So let's take a look at our template, at this guy, and then thanks to Brian's debugging, our collapsible column group. We'll hit run again, and then we'll go do the charts real quick. And now I haven't written a line of code yet. App Builder did all the work for me, and now I'm just basically doing a little bit of configuration. So you can see here, I've got my employee info. This could be collapsed on start or expanded on start. It's really up to you, but look at how easy it is and how nice it is that I can see more columns. So, and you can have these all across. You can have multi-column headers, multi-row configurations, etc. If I scroll to the right, we will see our avatar column show up. So there's our avatar. So you know how easy it is to do a column template. And at the same time, I've got my action strip here. And if I start clicking the pin, you'll notice that now I have rows pinned to the top. So not only do we support rows pinned to the top, we support rows pinned to the right, to the left. Well, and we support them to the right as well. But here we go. Look at that. How slick is that? And now if I export this to Excel, we don't support in the export to Excel the pinned rows, but we support the pinned columns. So you'll see here that you get the pinned columns. So the Excel configuration is actually really slick. At the same time, while Brian was debugging, he said, hey, before you do charts, can you show me the dark theme on the grid? And of course, so the way that you set themes is just through CSS. So here, themes grid, it says light. I'm going to say dark, like so, and we'll run that in a sec. But let's go to our chart really quick. And what I'm going to do with the chart is just kind of hit enter a couple times because there's no property set here. The only thing is actually this. And I am going to copy paste because I know we got to get to the rest of the demos. I am going to just highlight 3 new things. This is basic, right? Titles, right? But these are the new things. The new things is that the chart now has the ability to auto aggregate. In the past, you had to pre-aggregate at your data source and then bind to the chart. Well, now you have a property called initial groups. You have a property called initial summaries. You have a property called group sorts, and there's a few other properties as well based on your configuration. But I can say here, take that huge autos data set with all those fields, and it was really an ugly looking chart. I want to group by country. I want to do an average on the car value, and I want my tooltip to say average car value. And what we're going to do is we're going to parse this. So it says AVG space car space value, and I want to sort on this as well. So I am going to copy this and I'm going to paste it here. And I want to change this. I want this to be title. And I'm going to say average salary by title. And you guessed it, what we're going to do is show the initial group will be title. So group all my data by title as if I was doing a group by. And then I want you to show me the salary as an average. And I'm just going to say this is AVG salary. Now this guy here is what we can actually do the group sort by. So take this guy and paste him here and do it in an ascending order. Now we'll hit run and you'll be blown away because every time I run this, I'm blown away. So now let's click chart. Oh, look at that. Looks like something dark is coming up. And yes, the dark theme. How beautiful is this? Wow. And chart view. Look at that. How beautiful is that? I've got my chart grouped by country, average by salary, and then look at that tooltip, average car value. And then here, and now keep in mind, I didn't tell this to use a column chart. What the category chart does is it looks at the data, it looks at the amount of data, and it determines all by itself what it should render. And now what's cool is you'll notice that these automatically went sort of at a 45-degree angle. Let me resize my screen. Notice how they resize automatically. You don't have to do any of that yourself. Just works. Thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate it. And we will see you at the next webinar.